People see a running blade flex and assume it creates free speed, but the blade can only return energy that I put into it, and getting that energy into the ground requires far more than attaching a piece of carbon fiber to my leg. This is the complete system I'm using to chase my fastest mile. All right, good morning. Getting ready to go out, hit a run. Plan is hit a little bit of a snag. I've had some really weird something with my right hip. The last week and a half really flared up on a 5K that I ran. And so actually this is yesterday I ran almost a mile on a tread, just nice and light and easy. And it wasn't perfect, but no new pain, no extra pain. Nothing got worse during or after. So we're giving it a next small little test run, about a mile and a half this morning. We're going to see how it feels and just keeping ourselves on track for that mile test, and then getting into the High Rocks prep, getting ready for High Rocks in December in Nashville. Luckily, even with all this, still plenty excited about that. I'm going to go get a little bit of treatment on my hip later today as well. And so we're just going to hope that this little test goes just fine, but we're going to dive into my whole running setup as a prosthetic user in this episode, kind of break down what I'm doing, what I'm using, and just going to go from there. So first things first, let's go hit this test run. So here's the entirety of my system. Everything that goes on or goes into my running setup is all right here. The carbon fiber blade gets the most attention, but it's the only one part of the system. If the connection between my body and the blade isn't working, there's nothing this guy can do to solve any of that. In fact, it works pretty much the exact opposite. So just working through, we've got my shoe. That's pretty self-explanatory. I'll explain what's important about that here in a second. Here's the entirety of my blade and socket setup. Again, we're gonna go through those components. We've got this brake bleeder pump that plays into my suspension system. And then from here, we've got what goes on first, and that would be my sweat sock, my liner, and then socks that go into there. That's a little bit of alcohol and water spray. These all combine to create a scenario that allows me to run. All right, so I just showed you everything that will go on, and now we're gonna go ahead and put that on, and I'll explain everything that's happening when it's happening. So first things first, we've got our sweat sock. There's a couple out there, but the one by Swiftwick is far and away my very favorite one. It works the best. The second I was introduced to these, my whole sweat management system changed. So what happens, obviously, when we're running and exercising, just like everyone else, we sweat. The problem is, I've now got this guy that has no airflow, has no anything, and so sweat can pool up in here. So having a good quality sock for myself makes a huge difference, and I just find that the water doesn't pool up the way it used to in my earlier systems and setups. I think my suspension system also plays a part into that. And so from here, if the connection, so the sweat will get in the way of that connection to the body that we're trying to create. And so once that happens, everything else's potential output starts to go down. Like it's everything that can happen, how well it can perform gets limited for every little loss in connection here. So you'll notice I get this little alcohol spray so this thing can roll on. It doesn't get yanked on. It is an important specific thing. It's not necessarily high precision to put it on correctly. So as we put this on, we want this guy to roll on. So that's why we use that lubricant with the water alcohol mixture. And again, we just want this to roll up the leg. We put this on with a little bend. Boom, boom, boom. And it slides up and over. So now this protects the skin, and it helps create the connection with my suspension system. So what I use is a vacuum system. There are passive suctions, there's active suction. This is an active suction. And so for me right now, my fit's very good. If you're familiar with amputee contact or you're an amputee, you're familiar with sock ply. If you're not, you're probably getting introduced to this. These are little things we do to ensure the best fit, because this is a very static scenario with the socket, but a very fluid scenario with our limb volume and length based on hydration, nutrition, a little bit of weight gain, a little bit of weight loss. All these things can slightly change, and these socks help us get into our best fit. So right now, I'm not even in a full sock ply, but I'm gonna put on three socks. So these are basically sheaths. These are very thin, and it also helps with some of the airflow properties that are
demand it in a suction system like I'm using. So boom, we put this on. We want to make sure this is all nice, smooth, and uniform. If it's wrinkled or if it's off, it can create movement, and any bit of movement inside of that socket creates friction. Friction tears up skin. You add the sweat component to all of that, and so that's what we've got going on there. So this is very important, and how it interfaces with this then it becomes everything. So we've got our running blade. The running blade's probably pretty self-explanatory unless you didn't know amputee running existed until a couple days ago, or right now, who knows. But the blade is pretty self-explanatory. There's a lot of these guys out here. I'll explain. This is just the one that works best for me. It's the Oster Flex Run. We've got our pylon, which connects to our socket. It also then provides me some height variance, and I think that's really gonna come into play as we move into the high rocks season, when we start playing around with exactly how high we want all this to be. So the other piece we'll typically see on here for me, and you know that somebody has a suction system if they're using a sleeve. The sleeve, the whole point is to create security and prevent air from being introduced. So no new air gets introduced because it creates this seal at the top. And then what I talked about this is literally just a brake bleeder pump. This is how we do it because I don't have the room to use the same pump and to use the same suspension that I use for my everyday leg. So if I have my everyday leg, and the one that I do for a lot of my stuff, you'll see this guy right here. This is actually a vacuum pump. Every time I step, it compresses and it pulls air. And it keeps a nice snug fit. I didn't quite have the space for that on this one. So this is what my prosthesis dreamed up. Pretty cool. I literally am just gonna pump and pump and pump and pump, and it's gonna pull air. It's gonna create that suction fit that we want to have the most security. So from scratch, now I've got my running blade, we're ready to go. And so the last piece of the puzzle is the shoe. And so obviously running shoes matter just in general. So when it comes to getting the right height, so when I'm in my everyday foot, we want it to be exactly parallel and level, because that's how we walk, that's how we're gonna exercise, yada, yada, yada. We want that to be nice and even, so we want it to be aligned to our shoes. For this one though, a running blade alignment, you're going to intentionally align that blade to be longer, because as we run, that blade compresses, and we want it to all match at compression. And so if I didn't have this ability to adjust height, I would be very, very limited in the shoes that I could use. I'd have to use a very specific stack height to make that all work out well. So like right here, I'm in a barefoot shoe, and you can see we're not even close to level. Now my Adidas shoe right here, you're gonna notice that when I stand up, I'm still gonna have that height discrepancy, but it's gonna be a lot less. And what we've done is, I've done a lot of running, we've done a lot of looking, and now this, much less. And so again, as I run, that blade compresses, and that's where we want it to match. So shoes are very important, I think, for a lot of reasons, especially as an amputee. I've got one sound foot. I need to make sure this thing stays intact. I need to protect it as well. Putting it in a poor shoe and then asking it to perform is going to go very poorly. But on top of that, making sure that now height matches. So with this exact setup, there's a range of stack heights that I can utilize with my shoe before it becomes a problem, whether or not it's not enough separation or it's too much. They can get in the way and decrease my running potential. So that is the full running setup.
What do you need? Do you need to be, you need attention? Do you need to be in the video? Oh my goodness. All right, we're gonna do this with the assistance of my good buddy Aldo here. All right, so a little peek into the amputee running experience. If you're not an amputee, and if you are an amputee, we're gonna talk about treads, replacement, but also the other little bits and pieces we can gather from this. So first off, this is the one that I just changed it into, and this is the one that I just got done that I've been running on. This thing is quite worn. This guy is right there where you're looking, completely flat. That's how it started. So just like any other running shoe, the tread's gonna wear out at a certain point. It's only got so much mileage on it. And so one of the things that I really think that you can get as a benefit out of as an amputee is, well, when I've got this tread worn down, it also tells me a lot about my wear pattern, can tell me a whole lot about a whole lot. So first, where is it worn out? Like right here, this is exactly where I want my blade to be striking. This is fantastic, which tells me two things. One, my technique and how I'm running is in alignment with my alignment, with how the blade is aligned and set off. So if you know that, oh, if all the wear is in here or here, we might need to make an adjustment like that. We might be losing energy that way. Or if it's really high up, maybe it could be a technical issue. I don't know of any flow charts, so I'm not suggesting that one thing means exactly one thing, but this can kind of tell you the story of how you've been running as you accumulate miles. It's one thing for you to be in your office with your prosthetist and they see you run when you're trying to do your very best for them versus how you run whenever you are running on a frequent basis, running higher mileage when you get tired. These things can tell us a little bit extra. So one, I'm super grateful for my team at Hanger and my VA prosthetic clinic for making sure that I was able to get this replacement done. I know that it's not as easy for some people as it is for me. I'm very grateful for that. But also take data from this. If you're an amputee, there is data to be had and things to be learned by how your tread is wearing. And fortunately for me, this thing's got well over 100 miles of data on it, and it tells me things are moving the way we should be. Now back to your regularly scheduled program.
So now diving a little bit more into the function of this thing and how all those little details come into play, it's right here. So we talked about all the different, the socks and the liner and that integration, the suspension system. So all of that matters, including the alignment for every prosthetic and every scenario. What happens though when we get into running is everything gets amplified. Higher force, higher rate of turnover, smaller margin for error. And so if these things are off, those errors get amplified, making it more likely to create issues in the hips, the back, skin issues, all of that. So the way this thing works is very simple, but it requires a lot of accuracy. I am trying to land midfoot of the prosthetic, which really only covers on the running blade the front third of your foot for mine. And what happens is, as I land, it compresses, and the only thing it wants to do is go back and explode. And that's why I get the energy return. It's important to understand though, this thing's a spring, it's not a motor. There's nothing that it does on its own. It does exactly what I give it. It does what I tell it. It responds to where it's placed, where my balance is. And so one of the hardest pieces of this is learning how to stay on that blade, because the only thing it wants to do is go. And so as I'm able to learn to do these easy runs, was a huge piece of me learning how to use this blade, because it taught me to be patient. And as I've worked to learn to run faster, more aggressive, it's really come into play, understanding how to get the alignment where it needs to be, get the height match where it needs to be, to take that time and to put that energy towards being excited about figuring it out and not just trying to run as hard and fast as I can, but spending this time that allows me to be more efficient. Because like I said, when these things are off, it gets a lot harder. And whenever me as a below knee amputee, I'm already expending upwards of 45% more energy per step than my sound side. That's if everything's aligned. So that's how the blade works. It's simple, it's not easy.
Due to accidentally deleting a video, we're wrapping this thing up from a chair. So the test run I talked about early on didn't go so great. Treatment later that day did. To be not technical and not scientific and probably not all the way accurate with my language, but femur is just seemingly, it's a little jammed up into that hip socket. Some good soft tissue work and then a small bit of adjusting.
My chiro did definitely get me some relief. And so now we just kind of got to keep working on it. I'll be adding some bike in to take the place of some of the aerobic side of things and to keep the legs moving. But right now the hip is just not wanting the impact. So we're going to be all right. We're going to get that figured out. We're going to get that cleaned up, and wheels will keep moving forward. So bringing this thing in, we went over the very basics of what goes into running with a prosthetic. One thing I did not super dive into is alignment. And so alignment is just a series of angles in which your prosthetic, whether or not it's a blade or a foot, gets adjusted to try to match how we're moving, match how we should be moving, and going from there. So that's kind of the basics. So if that's off and I'm landing like this versus this is kind of the most basic explanation I can give you. And so I kind of want to dive into what the biggest issue with that I see amputees making, and the biggest thing that happens that prevents them from actually running like they want. And it's when they get the blade, their running is going to develop. So that alignment and what you need is going to be a little bit fluid early on, because you are developing skills. So what that was based off of, and now as you become a better runner, you may be striking differently, better, but now that alignment. So these things need to be kind of monitored regularly as we are starting to learn to run. And one of the biggest issues and things that gets in the way is trying to sprint right away. You don't learn a lift and then immediately max it out and then just max it out all the time. That's not how you develop a squat or a deadlift or whatever lift, and is the best analogy I have for this. So if you're learning to run, sprinting is not where you're going to learn how to run. But it's going to really inhibit your growth. It's going to make it hard to figure out that alignment, and it's going to make a big negative difference long term if we don't build that base, build the mechanics, build consistency, build the endurance to not just run aerobically, but the endurance to maintain our technique and our cycle through miles and miles and miles before we can actually really ask that and think that those skills are going to be there whenever we just hammer the gas to the floor. The other analogy is you don't learn to drive by putting the gas pedal to the floor. I think we can all understand how that would turn out. And the running's the same way. So if you are an amputee, I encourage you, learn how to do your easy runs. Learn how to figure that out. Think of running as a skill, and it's going to pay you back so much. So that's going to be the episode today. Thanks for hopping in. Thanks for hanging out this long. I really appreciate it. Until next time.